Okay. Today, we're going to go over Ethnic Enclaves, Ethnoburbs, and New Patterns of Settlement Among Asian Immigrants by Wei Li and Emily Skop and Wan Yu. So there's a historical pattern of Asian immigration. Most Asians, the majority of Asians came because of the 1965, everyone?
Immigration Act?
Yes, Mr. Matthew. If we did not have the Immigration Act, Fresno State would look nothing like it looks now, okay? The majority of Latinos, the majority of Asians came in from the 1965 Immigration Act. Now, this act was pushed by what civil rights group? What ethnic and racial group?
African American.
African Americans. Rebecca, you are correct. So there is a debt, a huge debt that Latinos and Asian Americans have to African Americans because you are not here in this country at all, and your parents and your kids being born if it weren't for African Americans. They basically said that it was racist how, all the immigrations from only Northern European countries, not from Eastern European countries, not from African or Asian. And also we had the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act, the 1907 Gentleman's Agreement that blocked all Japanese. So they said, let's make it equal. And that's why you're here. Okay. So again, we'll have another talk later about the anti-Blackness within the Latino and Asian community and how, we got to rectify that because you're not even here if it weren't for African Americans. Today, the learning objectives is we're going to learn about Asian American immigration patterns. All right, so a big question. What is redlining?
Isn't that the like a red light district is kind of like where you have like prostitution and alcohol and drug use, kind of a zone that's just confirmed like that to be that?
Correct, Mr. Aaron. So there's actually multiple, you are correct. There are multiple definitions of redlining. One is it's a red light area, right? Another definition of redlining is when you put minorities in certain areas, and kind of like they cannot move from outside the area, right? And so that's like two of the multiple definitions on redlining. There's several books, but we'll just do the broad definition. And let's deep dive into Fresno. Mr. Brian, can you read it?
'70s, founded, but it is native land. Big sandy rancher of Mono Indians. Fresno has segregated enclaves where large numbers of ethnic minority groups reside. Fresno's west side represents the most segregated and ghettoized. All right, so look no further for redlining, where they push Asians into certain communities, and you can see it today, 2021. Thank you, Mr. Brian. Redlining has happened in Fresno, no doubt. All right, 1850s. Miss Jasmine, can you read it?
First hundreds Chinese miner who settled in Fresno County came to work in the gold mines. 1782 railroad completed and they came to farm, grape pickers.
All right, thank you, Miss Jasmine. So Miss Jasmine, did you know that the Chinese were actually 90% of the Pacific Railway workers, 90%? Okay, and so we use them to actually build and give America modernity. Think about it, Miss Jasmine. This railroad that 90% of the Pacific Railway workers were Chinese. If they didn't connect the East to the West, we wouldn't have modernity. It changed completely America, and it made it accelerated. But Miss Jasmine, if you look, and I want you to Google this after class, Google the picture of the last spike, of the railroad. You will see not one Chinese person in the picture, okay? So there's a long kind of like masking of Asian American contribution, and unfortunately, it still happens today. So after they did the railroad, they didn't get any credit for doing the railroad. It was actually like not in the history books. I want to tell you guys, remember our class people fought for, our class people died for, our class people went to jail for. And I want to say that it was groups of Asian Americans who actually had to go to war with historians and say, hey, why aren't you not writing about the 90%? Because it was not in the history book that Chinese were railroad workers. Keep that in mind. It had to be fought for, just like this class. So let's look at early redlining that happened in Fresno. We all, I think a majority of the class lives in Fresno. Ming Fei, can you read it?
1873, after two Chinese purchased two lots east of the railroad, and white community got together and pledged not to sell land Chinese. They did not want to live near them.
Now, you might be shocked by what Mr. Mingfei said. Thank you. But actually, yes, they did all the work. 90% of the labor force was a railroad, and lots of Chinese died, were blown up and all you see now is like China Peak or China Road. They're gone. They're all mostly men. But, the white community said after they're done, and a lot of them were, and what they got in reward is immense racism and redlining. So the white community in Fresno said, you cannot live here or there. You only can live in this, like, quote, red light area, which they made the worst area, right? So this collusion, and I'm going to shock you. And there is an oral history from realtors in Fresno that said in the 1980s, that's very relatively very recent. We have an oral history from an African-American realtor that says that she was told not to sell to Latinos and Asians in Clovis. So that to some extent, they're still redlining, okay? That's happening. So if you're living in a certain place in Fresno, know that that's probably planned. Now, I don't, this is not about it, but I did wanted to mention just all the hidden history. I really want you to take Asia 151W. There's multiple instructors, but really there's like a lot of food history about Asian Americans and that people don't talk about, and Asians don't get any credit. And one of the things that Asians have done is definitely, they have, even now, 2021, massive Hmong and Lao and Mien are food market workers, and also the developers and farmers. But just historically, I want to talk about how the Chinese laborers built the Sonoma wineries. They were 90% of the laborers. Somebody, guys, had to make that rocky, ungrowable land, that backbreaking land, farmable. It was the Chinese. And guess what? Just like the railroad, when the Chinese finished, their racist neighbors drove them out. Okay, so if you're drinking wine right now, think about Mr. Matthew right now, okay? Can anyone give them credit for the people who actually developed the land, okay? And again, original land of Fresno is Native American. Now, you see West Fresno is considered a red light district now, right? Aaron, can you read it? Or anyone who can read it?
Fresno West Side is red light district. Early 1900s, simplest of terms, the red light, instead of being an ethnic ghetto, meant to segregate. Prostitution, gambling, opium, and liquor. Fresno has a bad reputation.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Nathan. So in now, Nathan, are you shocked? I don't do that class. I don't do the GIS, but we did propose an Asian American environmental racism class. And actually, Mr. Nathan, did you know that still to this day in 2021, there are some areas such as West Fresno that don't have the same resources as other places such as Clovis. They don't have the better schools. They don't have the better, and that is planned, Mr. Nathan. And so we do
By
have,
who?
well, historically, remember we talked about how the Chinese originally, they were not allowed to move anywhere. They created a red light district where, West Fresno. So it was collectively planned by multiple people, but, groups of Anglo-Americans. Yeah, historically for over 100 years, Mr. Nathan. Yeah, so you can still see the effects today, Mr. Nathan, because I can actually, and I don't do this in this class. It's really shocking, but I can divide up Fresno and Clovis, and I can tell you where people are living longer, such as Clovis people, and who is living to a shorter life, who has more health issues, and I can actually divide up Fresno, and I can show you with the GIS the place you live actually has some effect on your lifespan, Mr. Nathan. And yes, underprivileged places in Fresno that are planned have a lower lifespan. And it's shocking, Mr. Nathan, 20 years. There's a 20-year difference, okay? Not for our class, got to take a geographic class, but we did have an Asian American environmental class that was approved, 9 classes. So if you want to be Asian American minor, this is now. We got 9 new classes that are approved this Friday, and they're not in the system right now, but they will be approved this Friday, and then they'll be coded into the thing. So I'm excited to announce that. All right, so let's do a part 2. Now, if you want to look at labor, okay, who can read this? Asian Americans, what was the labor?
Labor was mining, farming, fishing.
So included
manufacturing.
mining.
Oh.
Sorry, what?
Go ahead, Nico.
Okay. Included mining, farming, fishing, manufacturing, construction, domestics, and petty business owners. Geographics in California, Hawaii, New York, Texas, New Jersey. I think that's Wisconsin, Vermont, Florida, Massachusetts, and cities. The largest Asian population is in LA, Long Beach, and Santa Ana.
Thank you, Mr. Nico. Now, a lot of people don't know, but historically, Asian Americans have always had a working class background. They came, this is pre-1965, as mining, Chinese miners, farming, Indian farmers, Filipino farmers, fisheries, Filipino fisheries, manufacturing, okay? And so construction, and to this day, you know, a lot of Asian Americans, you know, I would say over 50% are still in working class kind of jobs and, you know, still surviving. Again, not depicted in the census, right? Because they don't fill out the census because they're working. And also think of the millions of Asian Americans who are undocumented, okay? So there is a large swath of working class Asian Americans, okay? And they're mostly in Hawaii, California, and New York. So if you're in California, that's where most Asians are. And the largest largest Asian cities are Los Angeles, okay, Long Beach, and Santa Ana, okay? And so they're actually a very dispersed, okay? So if you're looking at like Hmong, they're mostly in Wisconsin, Fresno, Minnesota. But again, we have some Hmong in Detroit, Michigan, New York, and also Alaska. So the bulk is probably in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and California, but you will find Hmong in other places as well. You find South Indians in New Jersey and Virginia, of all places. You find Filipinos scattered in almost all the states. And so pretty interesting. So not that all Asians are at the same place. They're very scattered, and it depends on the migration. Southeast Asians tend to group together. So Vietnamese, Cambodian, Lao, Mien, Lahu, they're all usually in the same areas, like in Westminster, in Long Beach, in Fresno, Central Valley, right? All in Central Valley. So again, it's like groups, okay? All right. And so nowadays we have something called ethnic enclave. We still have it, but historically, because of racism, Nathan, unfortunately, you know, the Chinese didn't have a choice to move out of places. These were like, quote unquote, you know, red lined areas where they only can live in this area. You know, remember they tried to move because, you know, they farmed the land. They tried to move into other places. They said no. And so there's some places like Chinatowns or Tokyo towns in Los Angeles. They're living there for a reason. And they're living there because they were not allowed to live in other parts of Los Angeles. Okay. And so there's, you know, tons of books on this, right? And one of you, please write a book on Fresno and the Fresno redlining, please. Okay. Because you still can see the effects today. Now Asian Americans are actually moving to this thing called ethnoburbs. Ethnoburb is like a suburban, like ethnic suburb, right? And there are places where people are, who has been to San Gabriel Valley, 626? Who's been there?
I think I've been there before.
So, oh, great, Ms. Rebecca. Where did you go to? Pasadena?
I went to Pasadena, yeah.
Well, Miss Rebecca, okay, the 626 is this magical place. It's predominantly Latino and Asian American, and some African American, some Anglo, but predominantly, I would say like 90% Latino and Asian. And you have these groups, like thousands and thousands, and guys, they all go to UC Riverside and Cal Poly, Pomona, Cal State LA, and Cal State Fullerton. Anyway, it's pretty great. They grow up together. and they actually love each other's culture and they eat each other's food. There's a book on it. Actually, that speaker, I'm bringing her to class, called The Changs and the Diazes, how they're like melding each culture, helping each other do well in school. So I always, when I was at Cal Poly for so many years, I would ask my students, how did you guys get to college? Your parents didn't even go to college, right? And they're like, we grouped up. Asians who are poor would actually make friends with Asians who were wealthy, who immigrated post 2000. Some of the Taiwanese, they went to college, but their parents helped them go to college, right? So if you're Cambodian, if you're Vietnamese, and your parents didn't go to college, but you have a friend who's Taiwanese in your class, and those parents went to college, you grouped up, and all the Asians helped each other. Like working class Asians got help from upper class Asians, right? According to also this, Mexican Americans also got help from other Asians because they saw other Asians go to college. Hey, you're going to Cal Poly? Me too. Okay. So it was this like massive pull up of groups of pull up. So it is a really magical place, San Gabriel Valley or 626. So I'm going to stop my share. I'm going to share again. Okay. Who has, if you've never been to San Gabriel Valley, I want to suggest you go to I had a Hmong male student and he was telling me, let me stop the share. I need to get out of this thing. And he's from Long Beach. And let me get out of here. And he would often tell me, he's like, yeah, I'm from Long Beach. All the Asian dudes, they would always get together, play basketball and help each other. He's like, I don't understand in Fresno. I'm like, me too. I don't understand either because again, there are areas where Asians and Latinos are kind of like more the majority, but they kind of, maybe because of the weather, they kind of help each other all the time. So he's like, how come the Cambodia allow, they don't really get together? Whereas like Asians in Long Beach, it's like a daily, nightly basketball. I mean, someone should write a book about this. Like all the Asian dudes, they help each other. And that's how they get through Cal Poly Pomona, guys. It's like groups of Asian, different ethnic Asian guys. It'll be like a Korean dude, a Hmong dude, like it's like a different type of life. Now, I found this video on 626 about this magical place. I'm going to play it. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, so I suggest you go to 626 Night Market, and where you're gonna find a lot of Asian food, very, very famous. So you're gonna have a great time there. So after the COVID, please go to 626 Night Market.
That's a good video.
All righty.
Ready? Here we go. And over here. Okay. 3、2、1、3、2，可以吗？ Do you like it? Good.
Oh, David, 没事，爷爷，过来，过来。David, your granddaughter is so good at the piano. She's only 4. Thank you. She practiced very hard. Now she is the #1 piano player in the entire 626. 626. 几好啊。David, this song that they are playing, doesn't it sound familiar? This is a song we used to sing when we were younger. I remember now. I remember the song, it sounds a little something like this. So what, we hang out. So what, we drink tea. We just eating good in the SGV. So what, we eat late. That's how it's supposed to be. 6 to 6, young, wild, and free. So what, we hang out. So what, we drink tea. We just eating good in the SGV. So what, we eat late. That's how it's supposed to be. 6 to Hollywood doesn't even know we exist. Like it's a mystical land filled with immigrants. The food's authentic, price is perfect. Where restaurants focus on the taste, not service. You better share, it's family style. Time with the fam makes granny proud. Far enough from LA, nobody's acting phony except on our taxes. It's cash only. Tell the health department stop hating. Cause a B rating just stands for better tasting. Where kids drink more milk tea than liquor, and they roast more duck than swishers. It's the 626, man, check the address. Home of Sriracha, Panda so Express. We hang out, so what, we drink tea. We just eating good in the SGV. So what, we eat late. just eating good in the SGV. So what, we eat late, that's how it's supposed to be. 6 to 6, young, wild, and free.
Hey, yo, sometimes I wonder, am I still in America? Then how come there's still a language barrier?
If you need help, read Yelp, check the reviews. My elite friends make it easy to choose.
There's traditional rivalries between high schools that started back when there was still some white dudes.
No matter where you go, they can't match the price, so you're always coming back to the cafe life. If J-Town's got sake and K-Town soju, what do we have? Oh yeah, we got Boga's. Hot spot to get some hot pot and dim sum. Shout out to Asian girls, let the lights dim some.
From Shanghai to Saigon, Tokyo to Taiwan, Beijing to Hong Kong, something to bite on. Valley, Atlantic, Garvey, I drive on. 3 in the morning, cafes got their lights
on. So what, we drink tea, we just eating good in the SGV. So what, we eat late, that's how it's supposed to be. 6 to 6, young, wild, and free.
Fluff Ice, that's 626, Factory T-Bar, half and half, that's 66, JJ Cafe.
That's 626. Eat so much, shop owners really love me. Girlfriends wanna hug me. What's 22 a player like me? Can you please unplug me? What's good, Latinos? I'm the Chino, Fancy Chick, San Marino, MPK, Arcadia, El Monte, all my people.
She wanna hit to Anita Mall after we eat out in Monterey Park. She Chinese, but I'm all from Vietnam. Food out here is so good.
Walk through Bro, 626, JK Film, 626, Jason Chen, 626,
Olivia T, 626, TSJ,
626,
China Cafe,
626,
Acupuncture,
626,
Fun Brothers,
626.
Jason Chen, 626, Jagger T, 626, JK Film, 626, Fun Brothers, 626. Oh, David.
Oh, Jaylee. How are you doing? You play the piano very, very well.
I love those songs, Jaylee. Good job.
You're making me and the rest of the family very, very proud. Let's go to Yogurtland in the 626. Okay, let's go.
Alrighty. So impressions of the 626. Now Asian Americans are living in ethnic suburban areas. And I'm going to go back to my slide show. Okay. So 626 is an amazing place. One of the speakers I'm bringing in, Wendy Chang, actually wrote a whole entire book on 626 called The Changs and the Diazes, and how just like the synergy of Mexican and Asian people just are like, it's like its own world. It's like its own world. And, you know, some people are from 626, like myself, okay, by way of the Midwest to 626. It's a really interesting place. And so I hope you can come to Dr. Wendy Chang when she comes to our class. And again, I want to emphasize that she most likely will one day get the MacArthur Genius Award. So we got to use our money and pay her for a smaller price for her to talk to us now, because once she gets that Genius Award, we cannot afford her talk. Okay, so her talk will be on Taiwanese, elite Taiwanese students by way of Japan. Coming to United States and how they like really transformed America. So again, that'll be an interesting talk. So now Asian Americans are living in ethnoburbs. One great example is 626 down below, which is like kind of like a heavenly place for minorities. People just grow up in this ethnic, in the past you would call it Chinatown, but these people are not marginalized. They have college degrees. They have gone to grad school. They are college professors. They are doctors, lawyers. They live in this area. It's predominantly Asian and Mexican, predominantly like all the different Asian groups, and I think different majority Mexican American. Okay. So again, it's a really different place and it's a really different mindset, right? Because you see, if you grow up in this area, your teachers are Mexican American who went to UCLA. Your teachers are Asian Americans who went to Berkeley, and then all your friends are Asian American and Mexican. It's a very different place. And I used to always tell my Cal Poly students, I'm like, hey guys, you have grown up into a heavenly space, okay? Other places outside of the area that you know of, which is 626, are not as accepting. And they're like, oh, what? And they're like, yeah, all my friends are Asian and Mexican. That's all I know. And I'm like, okay, well, just know that if you go to like Virginia, it's very different. Okay. So again, this is the new migration of Asian Americans. They're living in like suburban places, middle class. All right. Who can read it? Who can read it?
Suburban communities, implications for economic, cultural, and political incorporation. Number 1, immigrants perceived as uneducated and poor upon arrival, but new 2000 immigrants tend to be wealthy, educated, and somewhat conservative. Number 2, some are conservative activists.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for reading that. So it's very unusual now time, right, to be an Asian American because, we have the core Asian Americans who are working class, right? And we talked about the refugees who came who, had a lot of issues from war, right, and genocide. But we have these like new immigrants, right, who are coming in as millionaires. Some of them are up, because to get immediate green card, sometimes you can if you can invest over $1 million into the US and buy certain businesses, you actually get a green card. Okay. And so we do have these like quite wealthy immigrants and they have degrees and they are wealthy and they have an elite status and they're very conservative and some are conservative activists after they come to the United States. And I'm thinking particularly of the 2000 Chinese who came in, who were part of the fight to sue against affirmative action. So very interesting new immigrants. And so they're actually leading the discussion on affirmative action, although the mass majority of Asians want affirmative action to help their own group because we have this group that are coming in 2000, small, tiny group of Asian Americans, but they're driving the conversation about affirmative action and kind of conservative. And so there are people actually writing books about them. It's very unusual. It's very unusual because it's on the public face. People will say, oh, model minority, blah, blah. But the vast majority do not believe in that. But it's, people who are very, very educated and wealthy. They're using their might, right? They're using their like little apps, okay, to talk to each other. For instance, if I were looking at African, who are the most educated in America? Who are the most educated in America? Does anyone know? What group is the most educated? Jasmine, Brian, Mingfei, Nico, Justin?
I think you said it's not Asians.
It is not Asian. The model minority says it's Asian, but it's not Asian. Who is it? The most educated. Over 70% graduation, BA and MA and PhD and multiple degrees.
Is it the Jewish community?
Oh, Aaron, you're so good. Higher than Jewish. Aaron, that's a really good guess.
Is it going to be Jews?
Mexican American is the biggest jump, right? They've jumped from A to B. It's the biggest jump from where they came from. So yes, they're the true model minority, right? In terms of jumping, right? For where you came.
I would guess because the population, African Americans.
It is not. Well, you're actually very close. You're actually, you got it.
I would guess because of the population density.
Okay, actually, the most educated group in America is Nigerians. That ethnic group is very educated, like number one most educated in America. Okay, so in terms of bachelor's, master's, doctorates, I mean, it's a very highly educated population, the number one in America. So again, it really messes with your ideas. Who is the true model minority? Okay. All right. So that is our class today. Okay. So your learning outcome today is you learned about Asian American immigration patterns. I'm going to stop my recording.